Hello, friends. This is one of those subjects that most people would rather avoid thinking about during a normal day, and I completely understand why. But there is an important reason to talk about it now. Not because there's an emergency today, but because the people who prepare ahead of time are the ones who protect themselves and their loved ones from being taken advantage of during one of the hardest moments a family can experience. Right now, in 2026, the funeral industry in the United States is experiencing its biggest shift in more than 3 decades. There are new laws, updated regulations, different choices available to families, and fresh warnings from government agencies about consumers being overcharged. Today, we're going to walk through all of this in a calm, practical way without fear or pressure, so that when the time eventually comes, you and your family know exactly what to expect. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Here on The Frank American, I cover information just like this, important changes that affect your finances and your family's future that many Americans don't discover until it's already too late. Subscribe now and let's begin. Let's start with the biggest issue and one of the main reasons the federal government has been investigating the funeral industry for many years. When families lose someone they care about, they're grieving. They're emotionally drained, physically exhausted, and suddenly forced to make dozens of important decisions in a very short amount of time. The funeral industry understands this reality. According to the Federal Trade Commission, many funeral homes have taken advantage of this emotional vulnerability by charging families for unnecessary services, concealing lower-cost alternatives, and suggesting that certain services are required by law when that simply isn't true. FTC investigators secretly contacted more than 250 funeral homes throughout the country and discovered violations of federal pricing regulations during 39 of those calls. In 38 of those situations, the funeral home either refused to provide pricing information altogether or quoted different prices for the exact same services. In one documented example, a funeral home told a caller that local health regulations required embalming, which was completely false. In most situations throughout the United States, embalming is not legally required. That funeral home was attempting to charge more than $700 for a service the family was under no legal obligation to purchase. The Wall Street Journal conducted its own investigation and uncovered more than 500 funeral homes involved in deceptive behavior, hidden fees, misleading pricing tactics, and bait-and-switch practices. Even more concerning, because of an unusual agreement between the FTC and a funeral industry trade organization, many of these violations are never publicly revealed. The funeral home pays into a corrective program, and the violation effectively disappears. Families are never informed that it happened. That is the situation behind the major changes taking place in 2026. The FTC funeral rule was originally created in 1984 and received its last major update in 1994, long before the internet became part of everyday life. Under current regulations, funeral homes must provide an itemized general price list in person if you request one, and they must provide accurate pricing over phone when asked. However, they are not required to display those prices on their websites. That means families can't sit at home and compare prices in advance. Instead, they often have to walk into a funeral home while grieving and emotionally overwhelmed before they can even learn what services cost. And that is exactly the kind of environment where overcharging often occurs. The FTC has been working to change that. The proposed update would require funeral homes to publish their complete general price list online. Right now, more than 60% of funeral homes still do not display prices on their websites. This change will allow families to compare costs ahead of time from the comfort of their own homes without pressure, urgency, or emotional manipulation. As of June 2026, this update is in the final stages of regulatory review. Several states have already acted independently by creating their own online pricing requirements. Just 6 days ago, on June 3rd, the New York Department of State released a consumer alert specifically advising families to request a general price list before making any decisions and to avoid doing business with any provider that refuses to offer itemized pricing up front. It is also important to understand your rights under existing federal law, no matter where you live. Under the FTC funeral rule, every funeral home is required to provide you with a written general price list that you can keep. They must provide accurate prices over the phone if you ask. You are not required to give your name, address, or phone number beforehand. You have the right to purchase only the services you actually want. They cannot force you into buying an entire package. And if a funeral home claims that a particular service is legally required, ask them to show you the exact law. Embalming, viewing preparation, and outer burial containers are not universally required throughout the country. Funeral homes are legally obligated to explain if a specific state law actually mandates something. If they cannot point to an actual law, then that requirement simply does not exist. Now, let's talk about how Americans are changing the way they handle final arrangements, because the choices available in 2026 are very different from what existed 10 years ago, and the price differences can be substantial. The national cremation rate in the United States surpassed 63% in 2025 and continues to rise in 2026. The biggest reason is cost. A traditional funeral with burial now averages between $8,000 and $12,000 nationwide, and in many large metropolitan areas, the price can be much higher. Direct cremation, where the body is cremated without a viewing, formal ceremony, or extensive preparation by the funeral home, generally costs between $1,500 and $2,500. Afterward, families can organize a memorial service on their own schedule and in a place that has personal meaning. Some choose parks, restaurants, backyards, or community centers. Others hold virtual gatherings when relatives live in different parts of the country. The memorial can take place days or even weeks later when everyone is emotionally ready, instead of being rushed by the time constraints that often come with traditional funeral arrangements. Beyond cremation, there are also two newer options becoming available in more states that families should be aware of. One is alkaline hydrolysis, often referred to as water cremation or aquamation. This process uses water and an alkaline solution to gently break down the body while producing no emissions and using considerably less energy than traditional flame cremation. As of 2026, alkaline hydrolysis is legal in most states across the country, and its cost is generally similar to traditional cremation. Another option is human composting, officially known as natural organic reduction. This process is now legal in Colorado, Washington, California, New York, and several additional states that have approved legislation in recent years. During the process, the body is placed in a vessel with organic materials and gradually transforms over several weeks into nutrient-rich soil that can either be returned to the family or donated for environmental conservation projects. Colorado was one of the states that helped move this option forward through legislation.